Has, I'm assuming, been a very good marriage?
It has. It'll be 50 years in December.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's quite the mark.
It is, I think so.
No, it really is. Hey everybody, welcome back to an episode of The Why, presented by All American Roof Pros and All American Heart Studios. Today, I'm sitting down with someone that our company was very fortunate enough to help, an organization that's very near and dear to her heart. So we're super excited to just kind of talk about, who she is and what she's passionate about and all that good stuff. Miss Ruth Kinsey. Ruth, super excited to have you on the podcast
Thank
today.
you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So real quick, just kind of give us a brief introduction. Like, who are you? Who would you tell somebody in your elevator pitch, that 1 minute that you get to introduce yourself to someone? What would you say about yourself?
Well, I'm a retired school teacher. Taught in Loudonville for 35 years. Very active in the North Central Ohio Soapbox Derby. This will be my 47th year.
40. That's longer than I've been alive.
And my husband is also very active, was active before we met. And he's been involved for close to 60 years. He's a little bit older than I am. And so between the two of us, we have over 100 years working with the local Soapbox Derby. He's in the Hall of Fame in Akron.
That's super cool.
Hall of Fame.
So what? Let's kind of talk about that then, because I know that's a big point. What got your husband into? Because obviously that's what got you into it, I assume.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Trying to impress the boyfriend or
yeah.
the fiance or husband at the time.
Well, he never had the opportunity to race a car himself. He had some health issues that prohibited him from doing that. But he got into the designing back when Soapbox Derby first started. You designed your own cars. Now they use kits.
Okay.
And he got into the design end of it and the building, helping kids build the race. Ran clinics, did all kinds of promotional work for the Derby, raised money for the Derby, took the kids to Akron, did all kinds of things with the kids. Now that was before I came into the picture, when he was young. And so it was a natural when I came to become involved. So I've been involved some years more than others. The last 30 years since we've moved to downtown, I've been very involved. Prior to that, I was involved every year. We were on the finish line. So I was involved that way and in some organization, but now it consumes our lives from about April to the middle of July.
That's super cool though. So let me ask you this, because obviously you're a retired school teacher. We hear oftentimes when folks retire, you hear that old adage of oh, he retired, he ain't got nothing else to do, he's over dead a week. Has that given you guys purpose though? I guess would be.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it's because even when I was teaching, because summer I was off. Yeah. It was kind of a natural fit. I mean, June for me has always just been Soapbox Derby month. You just don't I don't make any plans
That's awesome.
In June other than Soapbox Derby. But yeah, it consumes our lives for a short period of time. I'm doing things all year long because I'm the secretary treasurer, and I'm paying bills and filling out paperwork and all that kind of stuff. But nothing like from April till about the middle of July.
Yeah, so it's not quite as demanding during those off months, which still gives you the opportunity. And you've been conditioned to that with your working career. Obviously, you get the summers off, so you kind of get the fluctuation and the seasonality of it that comes into it. So that sounds like it's kind of played in for you pretty well. So you've been able to enjoy retirement, I assume, at this point?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
What has been your favorite memory of being involved with the Soapbox Derby to date? Obviously, the new one might be coming.
My favorite memory is the fact that I have kids that have come back. We have a lot of our volunteers are former racers, so they look forward to coming back and helping. And then a lot of kids and dads especially have said that's the best time that they've spent with their kids, especially daughters. It's one thing that a father and a daughter can do together that they enjoy.
Yeah, and that's one thing that when you and I talked originally, I don't remember when we talked. I think it was after my daughter would have been born, because it would have been in June. And that was one thing that kind of grabbed me, because I'm a dad of a girl, and my wife's into the horses. So for me, I don't care about them things. They could all drop over dead tomorrow. You know what I mean? I said for years, I don't want a horse girl, and I marry the horse girl. She manages a farm with over 160 head between 2 locations, and she's a rock star. But my daughter inherently is probably going to be involved in that in some degree. But when you said that, I'm like, that's something that I could understand, being able to go out and build this thing with my daughter and coach her as to what she's doing. It's a great learning experience. For me, I love the individuality of sports sometimes. And soapbox derby is one of those scenarios, right?
It is, absolutely.
It's how you drive the car. My brother and I got to make a pass while we were out there, and it was a lot of fun. But it's you. You're the person. If the car didn't work right, if something didn't go correctly, if you didn't drive right, if you hit the brake too soon, whatever, it's on you. And I think there's so much that can be built into our kids if more kids are involved in something like that, right? Not to take anything away from the organized sports. I think they're a valuable asset, but you're wrestling, you're equestrian for my wife's sake. And then obviously soapbox derby kind of plays into that. There's plenty others too, but that's what I really have grabbed onto with that and love to watch. I mean, watching the kids walk by and just the excitement they have, and they're showing you their cars and they're talking to you about their cars, and just it's so much. I can understand where the fulfillment comes for you guys. Yeah. Absolutely.
It's truly we try to make our race anyways a family. We try to involve mom, dad. When we have Builders Day, we encourage brothers and sisters to come, and we feed them all. There's activities going on. We try to encourage them all to be there. So
yeah, and it's quite the thing. Like when you think about it, because obviously they can run cars multiple years, so the investment, it's decent upfront for most folks, but the fact that they get to reuse those things and then pass them on to other folks as long as they haven't won is super cool about the soapbox derby stuff. So it's definitely a heck of an event.
It is.
But I could see where the coordination, I mean, we run some events around here that are not anything to that scale, and it is a lot of work behind the scenes.
It's a lot of last minute, it's a lot of phone calls when you don't expect phone calls, but it's well worth it to see the family involvement. So, and I don't think there's enough of that going on, families doing things together like they used to.
Absolutely. How many derbies have been run here in Mansfield? What number are we on this year?
Well, the derby started here, and then when it was out at GM.
Okay.
It started here actually in the late 30s. When it got really big and whatnot, it was out at the GM location. Then when GM dropped out of it, it moved. They had it here for a few years, and then it moved to Shelby for 3 or 4 years. 4 maybe. The historian, my husband, isn't here to.
He has to be scolding you when this comes out. That's okay though. We'll get the synopsis of it.
And then. We ran on Trimble Road from 1970 to 1991.
Okay.
And then they were widening Trimble Road, so then they told us we had to leave Trimble Road because it was going to become a major access road to Mansfield. So then we moved it for 1 year down to the industrial park in Lexington.
Yep.
And we ran it there 1 year only because we didn't know where else to run it, and it was a very unfortunate situation because they put a road grader across the road, so we couldn't use it from the top of the hill. So we ran our race. Anyways, it was a blessing in disguise. A little shorter than it should have been. It was a blessing in disguise because the News Journal picked up on it and said, what a terrible thing to do to kids.
So it gave you guys some publicity?
It did. And so then the city said, well, why don't you move it to Mansfield, move it to downtown Mansfield. So we've been in downtown Mansfield since 1993, was our first year there.
So you guys, this would have been your 22nd race in Mansfield.
Yeah.
Would have been this year. And then obviously you guys are going through some challenges. They got some paving going on and all that good stuff.
We understand they're going to that they're doing the infrastructure underneath and everything. So it's more than just paving. They're turning Main Street in similarly like they did to Diamond and make it 2 ways. So there's a lot of construction going on there. So we're not able to have it there this year.
So that, obviously that's kind of something we were talking about, is now you know, not just you, but the rest of the committee is faced with the challenge of trying to figure out, where do we have this thing? Do we try to go back to historic Trimble, which would obviously be a dream, it sounds like, because that would be, you know, where it kind of started, especially for you and,
Yes.
and really
Yes.
for a lot of your husband's career inside of this.
Yes.
But it just creates a logistical nightmare.
Well, it's more than just the hill. I mean, you've got to consider parking. You have to consider where you're going to put your pit area so that you can get your cars from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill, you know, to make things move smoothly. So,
the office cat making a good job of clearing things out. Usually they're gone. When he comes back in, I'll have him kick them out. But yeah, it's always something. It feels like, you know.
It is.
But it's really a good thing that you guys are doing for the community. What got you into teaching? Let's talk about that.
My mother was a teacher, and I always wanted to be a teacher. I always wanted to be a teacher. I don't ever remember a time when I didn't. And it was a very worthwhile career. I'm glad I'm retired now, because we didn't have quite the mandates and whatnot that are going on now. So it's.
I have a teaching degree, so I understand exactly what you're talking about. And I'll never forget the moment when I had a kid lip off to me, and I was like, and I was a wrestling coach too, and I was like, I'm not in the wrestling room anymore. I cannot, you know, physically, because it just. The way he said it, I could just see myself getting red. I didn't do anything, but I just had to. I took a moment outside of my own body, and I'm like, the problem is that kids. I don't even want to say they lack respect, but I think there's a lot of lack of structure, unfortunately, in the way that homes are run today. And I don't mean that disrespectfully to anybody. It's just a fact. There's something happening, whether that's the phones or the access to information, you know, and all that good stuff. But just. Yeah, I was like, this ain't for me. I'm going to end up going to jail or having to use my professional liability insurance for hitting a kid, and I'm just good, you know. So I started this deal, or I already had kind of started it, but that's a long story, and yeah, I've been here ever since. I commend the teachers that are there to do, to doing their thing. Let me ask you this, just because it's been a topic on the podcast before. Did you ever find yourself in your teaching career like in a burnout stage where you kind of got lost in all that paperwork, maybe towards the end of the career?
Toward the end, yes, I did. Toward the end, you know, I never thought I never really thought about retiring, because I thought, well, what am I going to do with all my time if I retire? You know, because it consumes you. You know, I mean, it's so much a part of your life, and you know, we have no children, so you know, what am I going to do?
Those are your kids, yeah.
Those are my kids. Those are my kids. I can't leave those kids. But I had to have some foot surgery about 4 years before I retired, and I was off for 6 weeks. I was in a walking boot for 6 weeks, but I then realized that I'm going to be okay.
I can find something to do.
I can find something to do.
Yeah, exactly.
So no, I never regretted retiring. You know, it was time for me to go, because you lose the enthusiasm that you have when you're young.
Yeah, and that's been a topic for me, and having someone that's a former teacher, I'd definitely love to hit on it, because I've noticed that, and I think that everyone gets into teaching for the right reason, right? Everybody. Yeah, you joke that, hey, I want the summers off, and all
exactly.
that. You do all this other crap, right? That you feel yourself, but at the end of the day, you're truly there because you want to help the kids, and like you have a passion place where you want to help kids succeed and learn. But in today's world, where we are just not teaching, we're teaching based on the aspects of to pass a test rather than to actually aptitude and do they have application in the real world type of thing, which. Once again, when the tests were developed, the entire premise was this is stuff they need to understand in the real world, and now we're teaching to the test, which at second grade level, they don't do a lot of testing.
No, and some of that, in my opinion, test taking is something that you're going to do your whole life.
Absolutely.
You know, and so some of it is you need to learn. No, you're okay. You need to learn test taking skills.
Absolutely.
because that's part of life.
That's
part of life. But when it becomes the main focus of what you're doing, then it's not part of life anymore. And yeah, you're okay.
I was about to move him because he was being a butthead. No, and the other part of that though is too, and you know this, especially even at that level. I have a high school mathematics degree.
Oh.
So I really enjoyed math. I enjoyed teaching math. That was fun for me. However, the problem is with some of the standards behind test taking, and maybe you can fill me in on this because maybe you have a different perspective. This is, once again, my opinion based and maybe a little bit of observation. But part of it comes back to, Dr. John Maxwell says it the best. If you judge a fish by its ability to, or if you judge a duck by its ability to soar with eagles, he's going to fail every time. But if you judge a duck by its ability to be a duck, he's going to do fine. And we've kind of made this generalized blanket testing system, which is, I think, a big part of the problem. Because as we know, kids are not all the same learners. They're not all the same test takers. I think there's two things that have happened with that, with the emergence of a lot of WEP and IEPs and things like that, which are great. They are. But also, too, I saw this in my observation that some of the kids didn't necessarily need to be on one. It was the parents not wanting to encourage is the right word, I guess I should say, and tell them, hey, be more motivated, stop being lazy. And I understand some kids have things that make them appear that way, so I don't want to put all of them in a box.
Exactly.
But also there are some that are using that as a crutch and then using it, and that's a problem I have with the real world application.
Well, and I think that what a lot of people forget with education is when you're in business and you're working with a supplier of materials and whatnot, and if you get materials that are not up to your standards and not what you want to use, you find another supplier and you move on. In education, we don't have that.
No.
I mean, you get what you get, and you have to take that child from where they are as far as they possibly could go. And people forget that not every child is cut out the same way.
Exactly.
And they have different needs and whatnot. So
well, a lot of that comes from, there's a ton. I'm big on the studying of like how we become who we are, and like our development ages happen between 6 and 11. And there's so much that goes into us as people in those time frames. I'm sure you watched kids from the beginning of the year to the end who went through something major, especially over the course of, how long were you teaching for? About 40 years?
35.
Okay. Yeah, so right about there. Over the course of 40 years, you have 40 different sets of kids that you got to interact with at that time in their life, but at different stages,
exactly.
Right? And I'm sure you watched a kid change from day one to the end of the year because something happened, and you may not even have an idea on what it was, right? So I think that parents need to be cognizant of that in those moments. Even my 8-month-old, she's 8 months old right now. Even my 8-month-old, my wife brought this up the other day, and I'm horrible about it. To talk about the smartphone thing. I play on it, right?
Yeah.
I scroll on TikTok. I do the doom scroll or whatever you want to call it. And she's more interested in the phone than she is her toys because of what she sees mommy and daddy doing.
Yeah.
Right? And we forget, even at that age, they're watching us. And then, they pick up our bad habits and all this other stuff. And then all the other crap that we throw at them between those developmental years especially. Because we're who we are by the time we're 11. We're going to be this person for the rest of our lives.
We used to always laugh if you had indoor recess and they would play school. And you'd walk in on them and they'd be sitting at the reading table and you'd think, oh my goodness, do I sound like that?
You get a real,
oh my.
That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah. So
what was the biggest, so let me ask you this. Did you retire pre or post-COVID?
Pre.
Okay, so you didn't have to go through all of that, which was a fun time.
Yeah.
I was coaching at the time.
Oh.
It was so weird. The logic behind it was my frustrating part, right? We could wrestle, but you had to wear a mask when you weren't wrestling.
When you weren't wrestling?
Yes. And it was like, I don't fully, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, but this just doesn't make sense. We look back, in the moment, you just kind of lived with life at that time.
Yeah.
But now you kind of look back at some of the stuff and you're like, did that make a lot of sense?
Yeah, we did that.
But, so what drew you? Because we kind of talked off camera. New Jersey to Otterbein. Why Otterbein?
Well, New Jersey is a wonderful state to grow up in, and I enjoyed my time there. but they don't have many colleges.
Okay.
And the few colleges they have are state, most of them are state colleges, not all of them, but a lot of them are state college. And they're very competitive to get into because there's so many people and so few spaces. So I started looking outside of New Jersey. And my brother was a year older than I, and he ended up at Mount Union.
Okay.
Which is about 6 hours from home. That wasn't too bad of a trip. And we had a great uncle. I had a great uncle that lived in Columbus. So we came out my senior year and visited colleges on my way out, stopped at Otterbein, or stopped to visit my brother, went to Otterbein, Ashland, Worcester.
That was back when it was still Ashland College.
Yeah.
Before you got the university title.
So was Otterbein. It was Otterbein College. And then stopped to visit my uncle. And I just fell in love with Otterbein from day one. I had 4 wonderful years there. I was ready to leave at the end of 4 years, but I had 4 really good years there.
That's awesome.
So,
what made you pick early childhood education?
I always wanted the younger kids.
Yeah?
Yeah, no. I want no part of junior high. Oh, no thank you.
I don't know how folks can, say, I want junior high.
Oh, no.
I've never understood that.
I'm glad there are people that do, but oh my.
Yeah, no, good for them.
Yeah,
right?
Amen. Good for them.
Because, at high school level, they will just want to be respected and treated like adults at that point. So, that was very easy for me to, be like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Because I shadowed at junior high and I was like, no freaking way. No way.
I was actually certified kindergarten through 8th grade because it was not you didn't go preschool to 3rd grade and whatever it is.
It's not the
now.
Yeah.
So, so they could have moved me to 8th grade science at any point in time, and I would have handled it. But I'm not an 8th grade science teacher.
What was the biggest change you saw over your 35 years in the education system?
I think education goes in cycles. And what you start doing, and then all of a sudden, for instance, reading. When I started teaching, it was all phonics and that kind of stuff. And then it became whole language type of stuff. And now we're kind of headed back to the phonics. So I think it's very,
It's very cyclical.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
What was your favorite thing that changed? What would you wish that you had at the beginning of your career that you had at the end?
Oh, I had a Prometheum whiteboard toward the end of my career, and that thing was wonderful.
The smart boards?
Yeah, the smart board. Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, it made life a lot easier.
That first year that we used them, though, was terrible because now I guess most of the curriculums come, with those programs already done, but we had to develop our own. So that first year or so, we were working hard to stay ahead of ourselves. But
so yeah, I graduated in 12, so those came in towards the back half of my education.
Mm-hmm.
I do remember teachers having to build out all their, then obviously once you got all your stuff built out, it was good for the next year.
The next year, yeah, it was great.
Super easy, but that first year was probably a pain in the neck.
It was hours. We spent hours getting ready for those.
That's funny. So what? We talked that you said, hey, I'm going to go 1 or 2 years at Loudonville, and then I'm going to move back to New Jersey. What has been your favorite part about living here in what I would call small town America?
It's a very different pace of life. It's hard to explain. When we lived right out, so we were a bedroom community for New York City.
Okay, yep.
My brother worked in New York City for a period of time. He spent 2 hours in the morning.
Oh yeah.
On the train going to New York and 2 hours coming back at the end of the day. Now, he learned to do a lot of things, he wasn't driving, so and I'm sure now with computers and cell phones and stuff, you can do anything. But when he got home from work, he was ready for the evening, he was ready to go.
Done, yeah.
Yeah, he didn't have anything to do.
Cat. We're going to kick him out. Go over there. Sorry.
That's okay. And then so I came back to teach. I was hired by a gentleman that was from New Jersey. It was the last thing he did before he left.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He said to me, why would a young girl like you want to live in Loudonville, Ohio? And I said, well, I'm not going to live in Loudonville because my roommate was here in Mansfield, so I already knew that what she was going to do. We were going to share an apartment. She was teaching at Madison at the time. And I said, we're not that far from Columbus and Cleveland.
Yeah, relatively speaking, it's really a great place to live.
It is, and of course, it's different out here because when I used to say I lived in Mansfield and I drove to Loudonville every day, people were like, you went all the way to Loudonville? That's right.
I remember people talking like that all the time when I was younger. Because, like, we lived in Mansfield and we'd go to Hillsdale and they're like, you drive all the way to Hillsdale? It's like,
I know.
Nowadays, people don't, like, you're like, I'm going to Cleveland. Like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
that's fine. Why did that change? Cars didn't get faster. The speed limit didn't go up.
But out there, with everybody commuting, it was, everybody, for me, it was only a half hour from my house to school. That was a short commute out east, So.
Yeah. When you look at the big city life, like we had my wife's cousin lives in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I don't know if you've ever been out there. It was probably very similar to New York. It's not. I don't want to compare anything to New York. L.A. would be the only thing I'd compare to New York traffic, right? But out there, when you say I'm going to drive 60 miles, it's not. It's a lot, right? Because it's a lot of stop and go and all that good stuff. And hold on. Oh, I'm just making sure he left. Usually we don't break the third wall, but hey, Ian. Anyways, but when he was here, we were driving from our place, and we lived outside of Norwalk at the time, and we're going to drive from there to Cleveland. It's about 45 mile drive, but it's all highway. Like, it's literally, we were going to Topgolf, which is right off the highway. And I said, yeah, we're going about 45 miles. He goes, 45 miles? We got 4 hours? I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Like,
it's a really different, it's a different pace.
It is.
It's a different pace in life.
It is. And things are a little further. So you don't always live next to the grocery store. You don't have all the luxuries. We didn't have I grew up in Mifflin. We didn't have any pizza places that delivered to our house growing up. If you wanted pizza, you had to go into town to get it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the life down there in Loudonville and Perrysville, and that location, very similar. Not a lot of anything down in those locations, but it's a good pace of living. And I would argue Mansfield, especially in today's modern Mansfield, is a very slow,
It is.
There's a lot of folks that commute to Cleveland and Columbus.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
More and more.
Yeah. How have you seen the landscape of Mansfield change? Because you've kind of been woven into the fabric here with helping out with our kids.
It's changed a lot, because when I first came to Mansfield, Tappan was still here, Westinghouse was still here.
Was Mansfield Tire still here?
Mansfield Tire was still here. Yeah, there were a lot of Lumberman's Insurance Company. They were a big.
Crane Plumbing was still here.
Yeah, a lot of that.
I'm trying to think of all. I'm trying to name them all now. But yeah, there was a ton of industry here.
Yeah, and it's gone. It's hard for a lot of people to find jobs in Mansfield. Because it used to be that you could find a job at any of those places. So
my grandpa used to say, you could walk out, you could quit one place and have a job before you got home the next.
Yeah. That's true.
At the next one.
That's true.
And yeah, it has changed. I mean, the world has just changed.
It has.
And I don't necessarily know it's for the worse. Like, it's all perspective based, in my opinion. I think Mansfield's still a pretty good place to live and be.
Yeah.
So your life has really revolved a lot around kids.
Absolutely.
How has that brought you fulfillment? Like, how has that filled your cup, so to say?
There's something exciting about watching a child develop, and different aspects of, what it takes, to help a child grow, to see them be successful, and to, I love to hear from my soapbox derby kids and what they're doing. And I'm now we're now working with children of children of children that have raced. So we've seen some families for, several generations. And that's exciting to see, where they're going and what they're doing.
How many kids of former students did you have at Loudonville? That's a very tight-knit community. Quite a few?
No, not really. Not really. Loudonville is not one of our big areas, because Loudonville itself is part of our area.
Yeah, it stretches really far because it goes up to like Port Clinton, right?
Yeah, we're 7 counties. I mean, technically we cover 7 counties. But then we go down as far as Ashland County, but not, then West Holmes picks up. West Holmes has a race. So that part of Loudonville couldn't come to our race.
Oh, that makes sense.
So because Loudonville is a very small school,
Absolutely.
but like Hillsdale, it's a lot of farm country.
It is.
So it covers 4 or 5 different counties.
Yeah, Hillsdale is the second largest district in the state of Ohio by land volume. Did you know that?
I think Loudonville's the first.
Mapleton is.
Oh, is it really?
Loudonville's 3.
I knew all 3 of them were,
Yeah.
because I know they used to always complain, when snow days came, and why are we didn't have snow at our area. One of the wisest things that ever happened, I was involved with writing a new teacher curriculum for when our new teachers started. And one of the things our superintendent did was, we said, they don't know how far the district. So we put them all on a school bus, the new teachers, and drove the circumference of the area. And he said to them, so you can see that in the southern part, you could have bad weather in the southern part of this county and not have it in the northern part of the county, but we can't send buses out to part of the county and not the rest of the county.
And it's very hilly down in that direction.
It is, yeah. And some of the needle turn areas where they turn buses around.
It's nasty.
It is nasty. So he said, don't think someday when you look out the window and don't have school, but there's hardly any snow. There's a reason for it.
Yeah, it's the one thing about Hillsdale that has been, it's a blessing and a curse. Because like I said, I lived in Mifflin. Hillsdale's on the Wayne County line, literally on the other side of Ashland County. So I lived almost in Richland County. I went to school in almost Wayne County. And but that 30 corridor has been a curse for Hillsdale for a lot of years. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of students that have not made it. It was it was kind of like an unknown, we didn't know if it was true, I guess, would be the thing. But we had a plaque in the office in memoriam of all the kids. And I tell you what, the list there is insane. And I would attribute it a lot to that. Because if you look, that's where a lot of them ended up happening. Because kids not saying they don't know how to drive, but they get forgetful, right?
Yeah.
And 30's a dangerous place. I'm glad they're putting in those J-hooks now.
Yeah, that helps.
They're weird.
They are.
I don't like them.
But I know. That one at 89 there's a quilt shop there. That one at 89, I still haven't figured that one out. I mean, I figured it out, but every time I get there, I think, okay, now what do I do?
It's backwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the theory of roundabouts. Everybody's like, well, roundabouts are safer. I'm like, because nobody knows how to drive in them.
Yeah, right. I grew up with the roundabouts.
You knew exactly what when those started popping up.
But people don't realize that when you're on that roundabout, you have the right of way, and I remember the first time my brother drove on the roundabout, and he got on the inside lane, and he just kept going. He couldn't get off. We just kept going.
Yeah, because you're stuck at that point if you get on the inside lane.
Yeah.
You got to pay attention to what the sign says and where you have to go, right?
Yeah.
And then if you're stuck, you're like, oh, I'm stuck. I guess I'll just be on the carousel. Let me ask you this. What has been the darkest moment for you in life?
Darkest moment in life. I lost my mother when she was 61 from inherited kidney disease.
Sorry to hear that.
And that was really hard. That was really hard. We were very close, and she'd been on dialysis for 7 years, and and it took me a long time to get over that.
I'm assuming she was your best friend?
She really was, yeah. We were very close.
Did she live local here?
No, she did not. But my dad had a job, and they had what was called at the time a Watts line, and so we talked 2 or 3 times a week because it didn't cost anything. She could use it on weekends and in the evenings, and didn't have to pay for long distance phone calls. So we kept in contact quite a bit. And I always went. I tried to go out as often as I could, especially after she got sick. And so that was a really hard I was only 36 or 30, not only, but because I know there are kids that have lost parents.
But at any point in your life is hard.
Yeah, and my dad lived to be 90. And it was hard, but it was not as hard as my mother because he had lived a good life and, he had done everything he wanted to do, but Mom hadn't.
Yeah, and the death is a weird thing in and of itself, right? And I know just in our couple talks, you're a believer, and this is my podcast, so I talk about my faith all the time. But I'll never forget. I don't have all my grandparents have passed on. I jokingly say, and I have a weird sense of humor. I don't know where it comes from, but I'm in the dead grandparents club, is what I tell my wife all the time. she's like, you gotta stop saying that. Yeah, I'm fine. But when my mom's parents died, it was somewhat sudden. My grandfather passed. He had a trach, he had a trach in, and it actually got dislodged at a nursing home, and he suffocated to death. And he was sick for a long time. He was the longest living person at the time of his death with stage 4 esophageal cancer. He had beat it, but he was like kind of a case study for that. And he was a fighter. But it's funny though that you say like the closure difference in those. Like when him and my grandmother passed on that side, they were on the younger side. They were both in their early 70s, and it didn't sit right. And maybe it was that youth thing, or something of that nature.
Didn't seem fair.
Yeah,
it didn't seem fair. They wanted to try. My folks wanted to. My father was an excellent caregiver. He retired early so he could stay home with her. But they wanted to travel. There were a lot of things that they wanted to do after the three of us were raised, and she couldn't do those things. They did have a home she wanted to live at the ocean, on the beach, not on the beach, but close
to the beach, yeah.
So they had taken, and I think that's what helped keep her alive as long as, because they took a small cottage and turned it into a full-time home, winterized it, the whole 9 yards. And that kept her going, for a long time.
Did it give you some perspective did it change your perspective on life at that point?
It did. Like, you better enjoy every day and move on.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And be thankful for what you have.
Yeah. Yeah, because it could all go away tomorrow, all of it, right? And none of us are promised tomorrow, but I think too often America's gotten better. We were kind of talking about the negative, right, of the education system and all that other stuff, but I think America, at least in my experience with how I deal with people that work, right, I think people are less worried about making a lot of money and going and doing all that. They're actually being intentional about being at home and spending time at home. Although sometimes we get caught into our phones and all that good stuff, but they're taking the vacations. They're
they are
before they can afford them, which I can make some arguments against. But either way, like just enjoying life, because crazy things happen, and life is very unpredictable. So, I'm sure. When your parents were planning out their life, your dad probably had no intention of your mom dying at 61.
No, he didn't. No, he thought she was going to get better. He picked us up at the airport the night after she died, and his first words to me was, "I thought she was going to get better." And we were like, "Dad, you knew when she went on dialysis that there was no getting off of dialysis."
Without a kidney transplant, obviously, right?
Right. And that was back before kidney transplants were as popular as they are now. Oh, yeah. Yeah. She wouldn't even consider it, because the first thing I would have done is tested all three of us. And at that time, we could have all had it. I mean, hers didn't show up until she was in her late 20s. So
what exactly was, if you don't mind talking about it?
She had polycystic kidney disease.
I think my grandmother had the same thing.
So she had cysts all over her kidneys.
They don't function at their full capacity?
No.
Okay.
No. They waited till she got down to 10% usage of her kidneys, and then they started her on dialysis because they wanted her to have some use of the kidneys. And she, in that 7 years, the first year was rough because
you're getting used to it, changing schedule.
But then I would say she had 5 really good years after that. And then the last year she fell and broke her shoulder and did some damage to her. She had a cut on her, or a hole in her leg that went all the way through to the bone, and they just couldn't get it to heal. So she was going to dialysis 3 days a week for 4 to 6 hours each, and then she was going to the wound care and being put in one of those hyperbaric things for another 2 or 3 hours. And it
just beat you up.
Yeah, enough is enough. She actually died from heart failure, though, because the kidney disease is really hard.
Yeah.
Or the dialysis is very hard on your heart.
Do you think, looking back now, that she maybe went on her own terms at all?
Yes, I think she did. I think she kind of gave up toward the end. Yeah,
it's crazy how much our willpower plays into things. And it's not, I'm sure your mom was probably just sick of fighting at that point.
Well, she was, and then every time we were there for the funeral, and then I went back several weeks later, and my dad said, every Monday, because she went Monday, Wednesday, Friday, every Monday I think, well, this is one last day that your mom's had to have dialysis, or to go through that. And it had its ups and downs. When they were living in Inland, the house that I grew up in, and they bought the other house, of course that was a summer place, so she had to have her dialysis down there. And then they put in a special shift at the hospital, and it was like 11 o'clock at night till like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, because they had people that lived in that area that had all the daytime. And her response, she had such a good attitude about things. Her response was, well, I won't miss any beach time that way. And we were all like, oh my goodness.
But that's a good perspective though, because like the attitude goes into so much.
Oh, it did. Yeah, it did.
Because I'm sure that's probably, it's and attributed to her willpower as well, but I'm sure that's what fed into her being able to live with that for as long as she could. She
wanted to live by the ocean. So my dad found a place where he could take the car and could sit her facing the ocean, and they would take their lunch and eat lunch in the car so that she could see the ocean.
That's beautiful. That's super cool. Like, genuinely, it's I tell people all the time, like, God could strip all this away from me tomorrow and just give me my wife and my kid and I'll be fine, right? And it probably sounds crazy to a lot of people, but like, I'm sure for your parents in those moments especially, they probably had that exact perspective, like, we're good.
Yeah. Yeah, my dad was like, we're okay. We get up every day, and how she's feeling is what we do. And if she gets up and she's having a bad day, we just hang out at home. And it was good that he retired when he did. My dad didn't really cook. I mean, he cooked breakfast on Saturday mornings. That was about the extent of his cooking, or grilled outside.
That sounds like me.
Grilled outside in the summer. But she taught him how to cook laying on the couch. She'd tell him what to do.
I'm sure he screwed up a couple meals along the way.
I'm sure he did. We used to laugh. My sister and I used to laugh at him because, like if they were having spaghetti and it would say you need 2 quarts of water, he'd get out the measuring cup and measure out 2 quarts of water and put it in the, we'd say, Dad, just turn the faucet on and put the water in the pot.
I'm that guy though. My wife will ask me like, make some noodles, and I do the same thing. I don't fault your dad at all. It must be something with us guys. Yeah, I'm very technical about things. I read the pack. My wife, she's a phenomenal cook, but she'll like just whip up stuff from scratch, and I'm like, I need a recipe. Like I need directions, please. I'm not that good, and I don't have that, whatever that is. Yeah. But that's super cool. We haven't really talked much about your husband. So you guys met.
We met at a Bible study. Well, we met through a Bible study here in Mansfield that first year that I was here.
Okay.
And we met in November, and we were married the following December. So my second year of teaching. Yeah.
Did you guys get married here?
No, we actually got married out there 2 days after Christmas.
Okay. Very small ceremony, I take it?
Very small, yeah, because we got married in December, so not too many people wanted to make a trip. So we had a reception out here later in January.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Has, I'm assuming, been a very good marriage?
It has. It'll be 50 years in December.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's quite the mark.
It is, I think so.
No, it really is. They do the anniversary dances at weddings,
Yeah.
And I was at one, the longest person was like 35. I'm like, there's no freaking grandma and grandpa here that can, because my grandparents, I think they've been married for 60 now. And they're always, it's between them and like, it depends on what wedding we're at. I've got another set of adopted grandparents, if you will. They've been married, I think, for 64. And it's like, I'm always looking for those two,
Yeah.
But that's quite the accomplishment. I mean, I think our society, probably not so much when you were younger, but especially today and really in the past, I would say 30 or 40 years, has been a throwaway society. Where,
it has been, yeah.
Nothing worth doing is easy. And marriage is definitely not easy.
No, it has its moments.
But when you want it bad enough, you make it work.
That's exactly right. That's exactly.
And I think that's a big issue with today's society is we just kind of throw things away. What has been your guys' secret sauce to having a successful marriage?
We do a lot of things together. We're very involved in soapbox derby and whatnot together, but we also each have our own interests. And I think that helps.
Yeah, so you have your own things that you can go out and do.
Like I quilt, and I spend probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 days each month with my friends in Amish country sewing or whatnot. He's a golfer, so.
We'll have to get out and play. I have to get him on my schedule. We'll go play.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm a big golfer too.
I think, but we make sure that we're together at supper time every night. When I retired, I said he had always fixed his own breakfast and his own lunch because he retired 10 years. He's a little bit older than I am, so he was retired for 10 years before I retired. And I said, so he had learned. Well, he had always done his own breakfast, but he learned to do his own lunch. And I said, I am not cooking breakfast and lunch. No.
That's on you.
That's it. You're on your own. So we do our own thing that way, but we're always together at supper. Usually always together at supper time. So.
Yeah, and that's, I think, too, like, it does happen where folks will retire and they realize, because I think, it's a book I'm writing called Identity Crisis, where we get caught in our identities of our other things, where Ruth is the teacher and your husband was stuck in his occupation. That's who you are as people. And then you both retire and you're like,
now what?
Well, yeah, we're not the same people that got married 50 years ago, right? And so having your own identity still is important just in life in general, because things can happen. Back to that same topic we were just talking about, heaven forbid something were to happen to your significant other. Are you still the same person that you want to be? And you can't just not be that person because they're here.
Yeah.
You still have to be that person.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good point, is if you can just be your own person aside from that person. Not to say that you can't do a lot of stuff together.
Yeah. And we're together, every evening. I mean, I try not to sew in the evenings. I do that during the day. So from supper time on, we're together.
Yeah.
And so.
Do you guys like to travel?
I travel. He doesn't. He's happy at home.
He's a homebody?
He's a homebody. Yeah, he's happy in his own bed at home. I do some traveling. When my dad was still alive, he just died 6 years ago, but I tried to get out there after I retired. I tried to get out there every 2 or 3 months and spent time with him, and so I did that. And I have a friend that lives in Florida, and I visit her in Florida, and
it's nice when you don't have to pay for a hotel where
you're going. You go. Yeah, it's great. This year I'm going twice. I was there in December and I'm going again in March. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So
how did you see Dad navigate because obviously he was a widower for probably 30 years of his life?
He was a widower for 5 years and then he remarried.
Okay.
And that's a subject for another day.
Okay. No, that's fine.
It was rough. He had a hard time.
Yeah.
He had a real hard time. He said the worst parts for him were after supper. He tinker, he worked.
He could keep himself busy.
He could keep himself busy in his workshop doing, whatever. He was an IT person, but he also liked to fix things, and he was always doing something. But he said, then I'd eat supper, and then I'd have that whole evening by myself. So he said, I got to the point where I was eating supper like at 10 o'clock so I could go to bed, and that was really hard for him. He had a good friend and his wife that lived about 45 minutes away. And he knew that he always had a place there. So on bad days, he just got up and went and stayed with them for overnight. They were both still working, but they'd have dinner together, and that helped.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Like, that would be a very, very tough thing. I mean, and not to pry into the remarriage thing, but my wife and I have had those conversations, because you do. As a couple, you just kind of do. They come up, especially if you have a healthy marriage, in my opinion. And I told my wife, I'm like, I put up with you. I don't need to put up with that. You know what I mean? And she says the same thing. But I could also see where you would need to fill that
gap.
Yeah, because there would be one, and you don't know how much longer you have. Right?
Yeah, and I think it was unfortunate when they moved to the beach, to the shore area. My mother was sick, and so they didn't get involved in a church. They didn't have, which we had been very involved in church. They had been, but she just wasn't well enough to do.
They were playing survival mode at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was not the group of friends down there that there was where we grew up. And at the time he was, he went to visit my brother. My brother was a bachelor, never married. So he'd go and visit my brother one day a week, and then my mother's stepmother was still alive, so he'd, go and see her. And then he had a sister that had some mental health issues. So he'd spend part of it, he'd go up and stay with my brother one night and spend part of it with grandma and part of it with my aunt. So he kept busy.
Yeah.
He was a very special kind of person.
Well, it's like we were talking about in retirement, you have to keep busy.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens is people get stale and they just
Yeah.
hang out at the house, and that's why you see a rapid decline after retirement. Like, too often they work their entire lives away, and then that's why, and this was a lot during pre-COVID. You saw a lot of the older folks in the workforce still for that reason, I think, because they didn't have that purpose outside of who they were as people, or as employees, or business owners, or whatever that role was. But, you still have to find something to do when you retire.
Yeah. That you enjoy. I mean,
Yes.
that
brings you some joy, that brings you fulfillment, that makes you feel good inside, that brings purpose. So I could understand, and that's good on your dad for kind of realizing that. Like, I can't just sit in this house and rot away to nothing,
Yeah, and Uncle Fred made sure that he knew that when they needed him, when he needed them, that they were there. So that helped a lot. That helped a lot.
That's super cool, though, that, he was able to live as long as he was.
Yeah, he lived to almost 90, 2 months short of 90, so...
That's good promise for you in
It
genetics.
was, there you go. Yeah, I got all of his other bad habits, maybe, or bad things.
No, that's super cool. Let's go back to the soapbox derby topic. I'll kind of use this as a promo moment because I think it's worth doing because I really believe in what you guys are doing. And the only time I let people promote anything, because it's not, I've had guys like sit in the chair and they want to like talk about it. I'm like, no. We're not talking about your business. I don't care about you. I don't care about you as people. But you have a passion project, which is different to me. And it's not something you're making money doing. It's something you're making fulfillment doing, which is really what we're talking about here is what is your purpose? That you guys have, you and your husband, and God bless that you're able to do it together. That's even cooler to me. What does the soapbox derby need? Like, how can anybody listening help?
We're looking for a hill for this year. Main Street is under major construction, and the city has already told us, and we understand. We knew it was coming, so it didn't come as a surprise. But it's more than just a hill. I mean,
the infrastructure has to be there as well.
The infrastructure has to be there because we have to have a pit area. We have to have parking. We have to, we can't block people's driveways to prevent people from getting in and out of their homes. So we're looking for a hill. So if anybody knows of a hill someplace that we might be able to use, the guys could go out and look at it. I must admit, when it comes to building cars, I have no clue how to build a car. But I can run the race.
In 40 years you couldn't build a car?
No, I couldn't build a car. No, never. I don't get into that part of it. But we're looking for a hill. So if anybody has any suggestions, we're looking. So. And
we'll drop some links on. We'll get some information from you on how folks can register, get their kids involved, all that good stuff, as well.
We're always looking for racers.
And then some sponsorship opportunities too, because we reach some local businesses here, and we'd love to see more local businesses get involved, just like All American Roof Pros has been blessed to. Because I cannot tell you how much fun my team had being
and it was
there.
Such a hot day.
It was miserable.
It was a miserable week. I was exhausted when it was over because we did inspection 3 nights and set up, and oh my goodness.
What's been the most chaotic you've ever been involved with soapbox?
Well, a couple of years ago, three years ago, we have a storehouse of our own cars that we loan out or rent out to people to use. You can also buy your own car and build your own car, but we try to involve as many people as we can. And we had a lot of cars left over. So we said something to Jamie, and she said, well, I'll just put something on the SLUS page. And I answered the phone for 3 days with people that were like, yeah, we want it. We ran out cars.
Which is a good problem to have, right?
It was a great problem to have. I mean, we pulled out cars that hadn't been used in a number of years, and that was like 2 weeks before the race. So it was very intense getting them all registered and filled in, because they had no clue what they were doing. You know, they'd missed Builder's Day, and you know, a lot of them had no clue what they were doing. But it was great. We had a great year.
It's good chaos.
We got some great families got involved. So
what's who? Not, I don't need to know who, but what? How many times has a kid won? Like, what's the record? I need to know this for my daughter. That's what I'm.
How many
asking.
times? Well, you can only win once in each division, because once you win that division, you got to move.
So once you reach the top, you get to win once, and you're done. Okay. So you've had anybody do that? That's won all 3 divisions? Or?
Oh no. Well, we don't run all 3 divisions. There are 3 divisions, but we only run 2.
Okay.
Yeah,
There's a group.
We had one that won. Was it 3 years ago? 3 or 4 years ago. She turned. You had to be 7 by the day of the race. She turned 7. I think it was on Sunday, and won the race the following Saturday.
There's a group of there's a family that's out there, super inspiring, but they are all in. Like, Dad has all the special tools and stuff.
There's a lot of them.
I just saw the one, and I kept seeing them over and over again while we were out there. And it is such an event. Like, the whole thing is just so fun. It really is.
Thank you. We feel like we have a very family-oriented atmosphere.
Well, and like we were saying, in today's world, if you can just make the kids put down the phone and just be with the car, be with their family, be into the race, like, be competing for something, learn how to lose, because there's only 2 winners.
Yeah. And that's hard. I can't watch the finish line when they get eliminated, because I can't watch it. I just can't watch that kid that gets out that hasn't won, you know. So.
Yeah, because we were, you know, we kind of made some buddies throughout the day. I'd call them, and I would, hey, how you doing? And you could just tell their demeanor changed a little bit. Their shoulders were a little bit more slunched over. And I'm like, hey, dude, there's always next year. Like, you're good.
Well, and we do run a double elimination race. So, and we have had kids that have gone from the winner's bracket to the challenger's bracket and come back and won. That's happened many times.
Which, I mean, that's to me is like the underdog story. So that's always more fun.
It is, yeah.
It's always a lot more fun.
Because they think, oh, we're in the challenger's bracket now, we're done. And that's not true, because you can come back and win.
Yeah, and that's, it's, like I said, there's so many good lessons to be taught there. And that's what, like, I have embraced it with, is like the fact that there are so many lessons to be taught, and the fact that there's so much that you can do outside of, like, don't get me wrong, building a car with your kids sounds like a blast. But like teaching your kid to win and lose, teaching them how to compete, teaching them how to be a good sport, you know, all these things.
Those are life lessons.
Yes, real stuff.
Yeah,
real stuff.
I am always glad. A lot of times when they get to the finish line and they cross the finish line, of course we're at the finish. You know, we're down there, so we see it. But they'll get out of the car and they'll shake hands, and that just tears me up. You know, I just think, yeah, this is why we do what we do. Yeah,
you know? Yeah, because you're building good people.
You are,
and that's the real W. Mm-hmm. You know,
it is.
And we hope that, you know, we will do everything in our power to help.
Well, thank you. And we appreciate everything you did last year.
It was a blast. It was a blast. All things considered, it was a blast. Our team, we got great feedback from our team, and anytime we can just give back to the community. You know, we have 3 major components here: vets, pets, and kids, and that one fit the kids category right on the money, because we were just able to be there and support and say, hey man, good job, and you know, the heck, they got a freaking thrill out of when me and Brandon made a pass. You know, they just loved that. And I'm like, we saw you go down. I'm like, yeah, it was fun. It was a little scary. I'm not going to lie to you. That car y'all put me in, I don't know, man. I heard that scraping, and I'm like, is there a brake pad on this thing? Like, is there anything here? Because Brandon said he started slowing down because he heard me brake. And I was braking because I'm like, I need to test the brakes on this thing, because I'm not going to be the guy that hits the hay bales down here, you know. But it is a lot of fun, and you know, it's crazy how, because you do have concerns, is, you know, is it safe? Is it all? It's very safe.
Well, we do everything we can. I mean, safety is our number one. I mean, we're all about safety.
Yeah.
We try to be,
There's stuff that happens.
There's stuff that happens, yeah.
Yeah, it's life, and that's once again back into those lessons category, but at the end of the day, like, it is a very safe thing for kids to do. I would have no problem putting my 7-year-old in there.
Yeah, I taught 7-year-olds, so there's some 7-year-olds I wouldn't put in a car.
I'm not going to disagree with you. There's some that don't exactly fit the mold.
Yeah, there are some that you would, but there's some that I'm not sure they're ready. Well, Jamie Kitten herself had a nasty accident.
Did she?
Yeah, she had a hairline fracture of her skull here.
Yeah. That's no fun.
Her dad ran from the track to the hospital because they took her by squad to the hospital, and he didn't even get in his car. He ran from the track to the hospital.
No kidding. Mm-hmm. And that was downtown. He ran. That's quite a ways.
Yeah, it is. It is.
But there's no father's love, especially for his little girl.
Yeah. But she came back 2 years later and won. I mean, she came back the next year, but then 2 years later she won. So
that's super cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm sure she can, talking about Jamie, I'm sure she can credit a lot of the stuff that she's doing today. She can probably give some credit to Soapbox Derby.
I think so. I know she and her dad spent a lot of time down on the Industrial Park. That was when we were using that as our trial run. She did her science fair project and they spent hours down there with, 2 different cars and moving weights and doing different things. There's a lot more to it than just building the car.
I trust me. I was watching them guys do that stuff, and there's some scientists with that, understanding where the weight distribution needs to go.
First year we moved it to downtown. They waited for it to rain. The fathers waited for it to rain, and then they went down to see where the water drained on that hill.
To tell their kids where to drive.
To tell their kids how to drive. Because there is a science to that too.
Yeah.
Because the gutter is faster than the main part of the hill.
Yeah, the one fellow was telling us he took his daughter all over the place to.
Yeah, there's a rally circuit, and we're not involved in the rally circuit.
Yeah, so he was telling us all about that whole thing, and I'm like, that's probably not for me. I'm going to be honest with you. We'll probably race in Mansfield once a year.
That's a different, you build a car like that. If you build your own car, it's expensive to only use it one day a year because you can only race in one local race per year. So they developed this rally part of it. And a lot of the rallies are taking place at locals that have their own hill, like Cleveland has their own hill. So it's not hard for them to go in and set up. We can't do that because it's hard enough to do it once,
hard, yeah.
Once a year. But that's how they raise their money then. They charge for people to come to the rally, and then
which makes sense.
And then there's a point system and the whole 9 yards.
How long's that been around for?
Oh gosh, probably 20 years, 25 years. Not as long as the All-American.
Yeah.
But it's a different group of people. You know what I mean? I mean, they're
all in. Yeah. He was telling me, he's like, I drove to Florida on Thursday, was back home on. I'm like, dude, I don't drive to Florida for vacation. Like,
I know.
Let alone to go down there and watch a couple races. Like, I could see. I'm all about. You want to drive a couple hours to watch your kid race on a Saturday, but there's not that many Like they get enough. The kids get enough passes. But like to me, you can be racing all day if I'm driving to Florida.
Now they're running them in warehouses in the wintertime.
No kidding.
Yeah. They're, like old Kmart buildings and old, warehouses.
Good use of them.
Yeah.
Well, how do you think that's affected, has it got a positive impact? The rally circuit, has it had a positive impact in your opinion on what you guys are doing?
We're local people, I mean,
Have you seen any effects, I guess?
Yeah, it's not the family-oriented. I mean, it's still families, but it's just different.
Yeah, it's more competitive, probably.
It's much more competitive.
Yeah.
It's much more competitive.
There's probably a lot more getting thrown around as far as money goes. And it's more than bragging rights, it sounds like, at that point. Because that's kind of like what the kids are racing for. Right. It's like to say, I won. But
they're learning when they're participating. And we do have kids that participate. They're learning a lot about what makes a car run. Because that's how when you're with other people that are winning and you see what they're doing, that
Oh, absolutely.
You know, that definitely gives you an advantage.
Product of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most.
Yeah, there you go.
Surround yourself with 5 good racers, you're probably going to be a good racer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, well, as we get towards the end of the episode here, Ruth, is there anything else that you would like to share that we haven't covered?
No, we're always looking for racers. You know, if anybody's interested, they would just contact us. As I say, we have stock cars and super stock cars that are available. We do charge $100 for them to use the car. That is not for us to make any profit, but it helps with parts and replacing.
Because you have to upgrade things,
Right.
And to keep the car safe. And
yeah, the guys usually put in new brake cables and steering cables and anything like that. We're all about safety, so we want those cars going down as safe as they are.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we'll drop Ruth's contact information in the footnotes here, and or the Soapbox Derby's contact information. However you want to slice that up. I don't want to just throw your number out there for the universe, but we'll give the contact information for that. And yeah, I mean, as we wrap up the episode, guys, I would just encourage you, if you didn't get something out of today, that's on you. We talked about a lot of stuff. We talked about life. We talked about, the ups and downs of life, and really kind of, going down the hill. Right?
Yeah.
If we want to wrap it up in a soapbox derby term.
That's a good way.
But, outside of that, I would encourage you, if you're a parent and you're watching this, to find something with your kids to be present with them now, like Soapbox Derby. Especially, I'll talk to the girl dads because that's what I am. And if you got a little girl at home, you may feel like it's hard to relate or something like that, or you don't have your thing because they're with mom all the time. Do something like a Soapbox. It doesn't have to be Soapbox Derby. It's a strong suggestion. That's what, based on our conversation, that's what you should do. Because it would get more kids involved with what they're doing over there, which is awesome. But outside of that, just find something. That goes for the dads of little boys too. Just find something that you can just build memories with your kids. Mm-hmm. I think that's just so important and so vital. So if you got something out of today, please share the episode. And other than that, that's a wrap on this thing. So keep asking yourself, what is your why?